Hello everybody, welcome back to another video on the channel, and in today's video we actually got some news from the official Wizard101 Twitter, and that is going to be the fact of the matter that we are now getting school-specific weaknesses. Also, we are getting try weaknesses. To this day in Wizard101, if you wanted to try weakness, you would have to spend 2 pips on a threefold fever, so pretty much get like a death pip. Now, the devs have been talking about this probably for about like a year or two, so it's nice to see it come to fruition. I imagine this is probably something pretty simple for them to do, relatively. So I'm going to break these down in depth for y'all and kind of give you some implications of how it's going to affect the meta. First up, let's talk about these single weaknesses. Now, these ones are a little more powerful than the universal weakness we all know and love. The reason for this simply is because universal effects are more expensive, or the devs value them to be more expensive. So let's start off with the death weakness top to bottom. Now, the only usage I see this, having is probably to prevent poison from being a thing, because, poison is still in the game that we know of within the next balancing patch. So this would be a good way to make poison like not as effective. I suppose you could make the argument that you can't really shield against death because, they just go into fire and fire nukes shields. So, I mean, the death weakness is cool and all. I don't really think people are going to be packing it too often, simply because, even if you do this to a death, they're just going to simply shift into cosplaying fire, which is the meta right now. My death, for example, in mirror matchups, I don't even bother clearing the weaknesses on me, right? If they go for a headless horseman, I'm just going to simply hit with fire and ignore the weaknesses. Now, let's talk about a good one. Fire weakness. This is really good because it's really been hard to mitigate fire for quite some time now, because they have a lot of high damage, high DPP, high piercing, and you can't shield against them because they're like the god shield countering school currently in the game. The only way you could weakness them, the only thing you could do is weakness them, the regular one, but if you did that, they were to simply empower our Dark Pact and then get even more value on you, and you'd be even more screwed. So this change alone is, I guess, indirectly like a very minor fire nerf in a way. Obviously, the weakness is not that much more powerful than the regular weakness, but the point is they can't just get rid of it with like a empower or a pact, which is what fires tend to do. So worst case scenario, it's going to throw the current fire players off, and they're going to have to figure out what to do about that now. Personally, me, if I saw this on my fire, I would just simply send a triple dot emote anyways through the weakness, and, just a free, which is kind of what they already do. So, I mean, it's nice, but is it gonna really help a whole lot? Probably not. Myth weakness, I mean, this one is just absolutely silly. It's more of like a PvE card. In PvP, myth hard counters weaknesses, right? So like if you're packing this and then casting it against a myth, you're just kind of asking to lose. I have no idea what you're doing. Um, Really bad card. I would only pack that as like, filler to set up a gambit in a different matchup, or as like a PvE player in some scenarios. Life weakness. This one could be good because life has a whole dot identity, and you could nerf the entire dot with this card. Also, similar to fire, a lot of people like to Dark Pact and empower on a life, right? When they see a universal weakness. But now, with a life weakness, they can't really do that as much. So, I mean, I guess this is cool to have. I don't think anyone's going to pack it because nobody really kills right now or Q's life. The only people that Q life right now are people who Jade. So, you're not really going to need to debuff a life wizard if they're just healing for 3 times the amount than they're hitting, right? That doesn't really solve the problem. In a perfect world where, healing and jading isn't broken and OP and can make the game last so long that playing well doesn't matter. I mean, I guess, yeah, it's decent, but again, not really a lot of lives in queue, and if there are lives in queue, they're not hitting, they're just jading, so could be good in the future, I guess. Ice weakness, same thing here. Why are you weaknessing in ice? They counter weaknesses like myth. If you do that, you're kind of just asking to lose. Don't really know why you're doing that. In PvE, it could be good, or again, as filler to set up a gambit, potentially. And the last one we have is Storm Weakness. Now, the reason this one is so good is essentially because it's annoying enough that you can't hit through it, but it's also so cheap and spammy that they can simply just out-copy limit you with your, debuff breakers. For example, that is why Storm vs. Death is the worst matchup in the game right now, similar to Fire vs. Storm. So essentially, this means that any school can tap into that part of, Death in the Chromatic Weeks. So, I guess that's good for them if they want to. If you really hate Storm, you could pack this and probably do pretty well with it. With the next bouncing patch, at least everything we know right now about it, the only school that should be struggling against Storm is Fire, because every other school can just set hard enough, like pack enough shields and you'll win, or pack a couple of Storm weakness if they strike, and you'll be fine. Okay, now let's get into the good part. So the good part is going to be the try weaknesses. Like I said at the start of the video, the only way you could do this was with a Death Pip and Threefold Fever. Now, it's been this way for quite some time. The first thing I want to say about this is it is going to be a very nice buff to raiding strategies. And the reason this is a nice buff to raiders is simply because you can use that new pip you get at the start of the battle and just set up part of a gambit. Previously, what you would have to do is get a whole death pip or have a death mastery or be a death wizard, of course, to set up this threefold fever and waste a whole extra pip on it. So a couple things. Basically, you'd only want to be packing this if you are on a balance wizard or if you are on a weakness school. So that would be like Storm, Ice, or Death. And the reason for that is simply because if you want to pack a school specific weakness, you'd rather just pack the 0 pip version for the school that you don't like and save yourself that pip, and it's a better debuff, right? Just a better deal. So obviously, in a sense, this is a buff to Ice, Storm, and Death. This is going to be a pretty major buff to Death. For example, right, let's say you elemental weakness of Fire, right? And then the Fire breaks the Fire weakness, right? You could then Vampire the other two and make them into -60s, getting like a full, like, 3 or 4 turns of value out of that. Absolutely insane. Mind you, the only reasons deaths stopped weakness stacking, which they kind of still do it now, but the reason it kind of fell out of the meta is simply because everyone had so many counters for it. Either way though, this will be a pretty nice buff to death because now you have a different way to set up your Avenging Fossil Gambit or your Vampire. As for Ice and Storm, again, unfortunately, these schools kind of have an underdeveloped library when it comes to weaknesses. You don't really have a spell like Vampire that just like hits, it's just amazing. However, for Ice Wizards, a cool part of this is that Path B Colossus actually will get some usage and synergy here, simply because, you'll do the try weakness, they'll take it off probably, to whatever school they are, and then you could hit and then gambit the other two for a 55 chop, which actually is pretty freaking solid, especially if you stack this with the TC one and the main deck one. It's like a 110% buff. And the only spell Storm has to have synergy with weaknesses is Path P Kraken, which is also a top 3 worst spell in the whole entire game. However, unlike Death, Storm and Ice actually have a pretty good, Jin, or what's it called, Oni. So you might see this have some more play. So you'll see Death go the weakness route for like Fossil and Vampire, more of like a utility route. And you'll see Ice and you'll see Storm go for their actual big, Gambit, their Oni, or their Jin for damage. Now let's talk about the matchups that these are actually going to be good in, or effective against. As a Storm, you could definitely pack Elemental Weakness for your Oni setup against schools like Balance. You could do it for Death if you want to, Fire, Life, obviously. Fire and Life, you're pretty much already winning those anyways, or you should be, I would hope. Balance, I'd say this is nice to have against Balance because Scarab is an as good as like a counter to this. Against death, I mean, hey, it's something, I guess, but they're just gonna be able to do it better against you than you can against them. And that simply stems from the dual school issue, right? If the death and I are doing the same thing, but he can dual school and counter things and I can't, obviously it's an unfair matchup. They're gonna win even if we are doing the same thing and we're both weakness schools. After they nerf catch of the day, at least in the storm mirror, I think this could actually be kinda good, the elemental weakness. But until they nerf catch of the day, I don't really see a point in running elemental weakness on a storm. I think you're just better off packing like, 4 copies of spirit weakness because you know how OP oppressive death is. And obviously, as an ice, you just weakness stack anybody who isn't a ice or a myth. So as an ice, you have a clear, nice win condition here with your Jin. You could debuff people and your Colossus, which is great. Same thing with death, right? You can just weakness stack anybody now. Maybe other than other deaths who cosplay, or of course your counter matchups, myths and ice. Anyways, that's it for the video today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully you learned something new. Probably a longer one. I apologize for that, but I wanted to be pretty clear with everything. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I do keep you guys up to date on all the Wizard news, and we keep it real here on the channel. So that's always nice, and I hope to see you on the next one. Thank you for watching. Take care, and goodbye.